again in the Gospel of John this morning, chapter 14, verses 6 and 7. By way of introduction to that, I want to think about a historical event, something that happened a couple hundred years ago in the early 1800s, and that is the journey of Lewis and Clark from St. Louis, Missouri, across the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific and back. Now, that particular story has captured the imagination of Americans for a long time, and I think one of the reasons for that is because no one had ever done it before. They had no maps to speak of to say where they had to go. They just knew that the ocean was west, and if you keep going, you're going to get there eventually. And they knew that there were sizable mountains in their way, but they had no idea where the passes in the mountains were. You don't just cross the Rocky Mountains anywhere you feel like it. You have to find a pass, or you're never going to make it. They didn't know how long it would take to get across the mountains. They didn't know, if the snows were going to get snowed in. I mean, that has happened, like the Donner Party. You could get caught in a freak snowstorm in the Rocky Mountains. So they didn't really know that. They were going upstream on the Missouri half the way there. That must have been fun, rowing upstream day after day in their canoes and their one flat-bottom boat that they had. And then they basically walked and used horses the rest of the way till they got on the other side. And when they got all the way to the Pacific Ocean, what did they do? They turned around and went back. More or less the same way. They looked at some other routes and whatnot as well. What did they have to get across? They had a guide. They had an interesting guide. Their guide was a woman. Now that's a little bit interesting. Their guide was an Indian woman. Which is more unusual, and she was also pregnant at the time. She gave birth during the journey. How would you like to be her? Humping across the Rocky Mountains in that state. No small task. The crazy thing is how they ever found their way. How did they decide from one choice to the next? When you come to a part of the mountains where you say, well, that looks like the right way, but maybe we should go that way. How did they ever do it? It's quite the thing. We're going to talk a little bit today about the way, about finding the way. We've looked at that this morning in our text that we read already, and hopefully that has gotten us in the right spot. So let's look at verses 6 and 7 first, and then we'll break them down. Quite famous verses here. Verse 6 and 7, Jesus answered, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Actually, I meant just verse 6. Why did I put 7 on there? We're only talking about verse 6 today. I probably originally thought I'd get all the way through 7, but it didn't happen. So, verse 6. We're going to start by looking at the truth. What does it take to claim an absolute truth? When you claim something is true. Now you're not speculating. This is not a theory that you have. You are saying that this is true. Now to claim that you know something with absolute certainty is kind of bold, is it not? As a scientist, as a person, as whatever you happen to be in your job or whatever, if you say this is fact, you better know what you're talking about. Because if you're not 100% sure, you can get yourself into trouble. Beyond that, if you claim that what you know is of crucial importance to everyone in the world, that would certainly be arrogant at the extreme if you're not right. To say that I know something that is universally true. Such an idea, whatever it is going to be divisive by nature. There are going to be people that accept it and people who do not. In the end, society, whatever society it is always going to be afraid of truth with a capital T. It is always going to be reluctant and hesitant around that idea. You see, things which are true for everyone are a threat to life, to living life without consequences. People who live life for themselves, people who live life for the moment, they are put under constraints when they learn about absolute truth. It's an uncomfortable notion if you are living your life just for today. It also brings into focus concepts of absolute right and absolute wrong that are better left blurry when society has no intention of following them. If society doesn't want to live by truth, they also don't want to hear about it. And they don't want to learn about it. You see, truth opens the door to another concept. When there is truth, there is also justice. And there's also guilt and judgment. because it is the standard by which they must be measured. So when you talk about absolute truth, you might think, this is not a very divisive idea, this is not a very threatening idea. It actually is. Because in people's minds, the next step after that is judgment. You see, absolute truth is an indictment of the wisdom of man. It goes against our earthly wisdom, and it is an homage to the wisdom of God. Our own experience is too limited to know things for certain without relying upon God's perspective, God's eternal perspective. People have always felt the need to seek for absolute truth. Philosophers, no matter what country they came from in history, they're always seeking for absolute truth, things which are true everywhere, all the time, for everybody. But they have always lacked the ability to discover that truth on their own. You see, we can get there, but not without help, not without God enlightening us. So Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. He is starting with an absolute truth. How can we know the way? How can we know the way? This is in response to a question from Thomas. Back in verse 5, Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Which prompts Jesus' answer. That is the context here. You see, Jesus isn't, he just finished saying that he was going to prepare a place in his Father's house. We talked about that a few weeks ago. I am going to prepare a place for you. But he didn't say where it was or how you can get there. He told his disciples that they already know. He says, hey, you already know where it is, and you already know how to get there. At which point Thomas raises his hand and says, wait a minute, I don't know where it is and how to get there. I wonder if Thomas was thinking, am I the only one that didn't get the memo? Was I not paying attention when Jesus told us how to get there? Because I missed it. I don't know how to get there. And so Jesus says to him, I am the way. Now this is unexpected. This is an unexpected answer. The disciples may have been looking for directions. How do we get to heaven? Why don't you just tell us, how to get there? They were not expecting Jesus to say that. When you are asked the question, how do I get to heaven? People say that, do they not? They want to know how you get to heaven. How many of them are looking for a person as the answer? Not that many. Because there are other options. Some people think that the path to heaven is a certain physical place. That if you can find a place, you can get to heaven. They have searched for it. The Fountain of Youth. They searched for it. Atlantis, the lost city. You might not think that that's all that serious, but they took it seriously in the past. Men spent their lives in search of these places. During the Middle Ages, people were fascinated with the concept of the idea of recapturing Jerusalem. And that sparked the Crusades in part. If we can get Jerusalem back, we will have the place that is the path to eternal life. Other people have sought things, objects, like the Holy Grail, or the Ark of the Covenant, or the one true cross. I don't know, a variety of other magical and mystical items. Now you might be thinking, that's just Indiana Jones stuff. That's actually 2 out of the 3 Indiana Jones movies of the first 3. That stuff's not real. Okay, but people devoted their lives to searching for that in history. People have sought places. People have sought things. People have put their trust in ideas. One of those ideas is karma and reincarnation, which basically says if at first you don't succeed, try again. If you don't get it right this time, don't worry about it. You're coming back again, and you're going to keep at this till you get it right. Another idea that people have sought solace in when they search for heaven is the idea of Buddhism and nirvana. The idea that says heaven isn't real, but then again, neither is this life that you're living right now, so don't worry about it. None of this is real. Well, that's one way. 2 other ways that have had some traction in Western culture especially are these 2. Number 1, they have sought solace in the idea of scales of justice. That if I can simply have more good deeds in my life than bad, that's all I need. I'm in. That's all I need. Just to be a little bit better than good. 51% is all you need. And there is a new idea that has come about recently especially. You You will hear this more and more. If you stop a teenager on the street and talk to them about God, you will almost invariably hear this phrase said at some time. My God would do that. My God is this. My God is that. If you define God on your own so that you meet the standard that you set up for yourself, it's all convenient, isn't it? You don't have to worry about getting to heaven as long as you define the standard on how to get there yourself, because you're going to define it in a way that you're going to live up to. So people have sought the path to heaven in places, things, and especially in ideas. In contrast to all of those things, Jesus says, I am the way. Jesus offers himself. It is not restricted to any one place. It is not reliant upon any one thing. It is not beholden to any one idea. Jesus instead asks you to place your trust in him. Consider that distinction for a moment. Stop and think about that. Many people, when they think about Christianity, especially non-Christians, even some Christians, define us as a system of beliefs. Christianity is all those things that you believe, all those ideas. Well, it is in a sense, but that has never been and never will be the foundation of our faith. Our faith is not built upon ideas. Let that sink in for a moment. Christianity is the people who follow Christ. We are the people who put our faith not in an idea, but in a person. In the person of God's own Son, Jesus Christ. Because he is the way. Now Jesus also said, I am the way and the truth. How important is that kind of truth that we were talking about initially? Absolute truth. Truth with a capital T. How important is that? Do we really need a faith that is for everyone? Or can we get by with one that is simply sufficient for us? Would we be fine if our faith was just for us and didn't really matter for everyone else? What would be different? What would be different if Jesus only claimed to be a truth? If you went back and read this text and it said, I am a way and a truth and a life. It's a small word to insert there. Where would it be different? What would be different? Everything would be different. You see, Jesus claimed to be the way to heaven. Either this is true or it's not. That's what you're faced with. If this is false, what do you care about what else Jesus had to say? Because he lied about the most important thing in the world. And if this is true, why would you look anywhere else for anything? You see, the idea that there are many truths and that they are all equally valid and equally palatable is fundamentally wrong in terms of Christianity. But it is the basis of postmodernism. Postmodernism is basically the philosophical way of looking at the world that has emerged after the world wars. And in that way of looking at the world, the search for overall, overarching, universal truth has been abandoned. The philosophers and the teachers and the great thinkers have said it's not out there. Instead, they look for truth in quotation marks. Truth that anyone can find and accept, that can be celebrated regardless of whether or not it's full of contradictions, regardless of the results of it. You see, we've entered a phase in history where truth comes with quotation marks instead of a capital T. It is very different. And Jesus is entirely incompatible with being one truth among many. He rejected it. He rejected that idea time and time again with his own claims, and then finally and forever rejected it once and for all with his sacrifice and resurrection. Jesus is not a truth. Faith in Jesus, in the end, is a true-false question. My students love true-false questions, which is why I never ask them, because they figure I've got a 50-50 chance of getting this right. And they can just guess, which is why I never ask them, because I'm hip to that. I know what it's all about. But faith in Jesus is a true or false question, and it must be answered. You can't leave this one blank on the answer sheet. You have to choose. In the end, to know the truth is to be set free. You see, the search for truth is over once you've found it. You can stop wandering. You can actually start living according to the truth. The implications are profound. It gives you confidence that the sacrifices you make today are in the service of a greater good. You can give up things that are near and dear to you because you serve a higher purpose when you have found truth. It is also a source of sincere hope because your life is not about wishful thinking anymore. Your life is about something that you know. The combination of truth and faith is the power that can overcome this world. Think about your options. You can have faith without truth. What do you have but a fool's faith? You've got faith in something that is not going to help you at all because it's not true. You can have truth but no faith. I find that to be pitiful. If you know what the truth is, but lack the courage and the wherewithal to actually have faith in it. But you can also have faith in the truth. And that is nothing short of divine. When you find faith in the truth. Jesus offers himself as the embodiment of truth. The combination of word and deed working in perfect harmony with each other. Jesus is the truth. A unique combination, never before achieved and impossible to duplicate. He is the truth. And one more. Jesus said also, I am the life. The life. Now you can talk about truth without life. What would happen if the truth was that this life is all there is? If we discovered absolutely and for certain that the only thing you've got is this life here, and when you die, that's it, we're done. It might be the truth. What would we do? Well, make the best of it, I guess, but where is our hope in that? Without life on the other side of death, without faith and hope and life on the other side of the grave, this life would be changed in ways very fundamental and far-reaching. Why would anyone invest in long-term investments? Why would anyone plan for future generations? Why would you even bother if this life is all there is? Why would anyone sacrifice themselves in the service of others? We just had Veterans Day a couple days ago. Why would anyone sacrifice themselves in service to their country if this life is all there is? If this life is all there is, those military cemeteries are full of fools. But his life is not all there is, which is why we honor him. Also, if this life was all there is, how would there be any good worth thinking about higher than my own self-interest? I would be the only thing worth caring about if this life was all there is. How could you build anything other than that? You can't. Fortunately, we have something very different. We have the true way that leads to life. You see, if eternal life is out there, but we can't get to it, we've had a cruel hoax on the part of God. He has shown us something that we can't find. It's like taking a piece of candy and holding it over an 8-year-old just where they can't reach it. Saying, here it is, come on, get it. Anyone ever do that? No? Never did that to a sibling? Never once? I don't buy that. All right, maybe their siblings were bigger than you and they would have just punched you in the gut and taken it. But for those of you who are older, you've probably done that at least once. It wouldn't be any better for God to offer you a false sense of hope that you can somehow get to this so-called heaven on your own if you can. But we don't have that. What do we have? What does Jesus offer? Jesus offers us a way to the Father. And we saw that in both texts this morning, both in Hebrews and Ephesians, where they were talking about how we can get to the Father through Jesus. And that is what he offers us. Where once there was a vast gulf looming between us and God, now a bridge is spanning it. Now a bridge is there for those willing to cross it. Is that not an interesting, ironic word to talk about crossing the bridge between God and man, which is certainly a cross? Who deserves the credit for that? Who deserves the credit for you getting to the other side? The one who built the bridge with his own 2 nail-pierced hands, or the one who walked across it? Not much of a contest on who deserves the thanks and who deserves the credit and the honor. What we have when we have life is life for today and life for tomorrow. I think one of the interesting things about Jesus' promise of life after death is his willingness to begin to deliver on that promise here and now. You see, for those who doubt, he offers them this. He offers them an opportunity to witness Christians in progress, as it were. We are demonstration models. We are on the showroom floor showing the world what it is like when someone has the way, the truth, and the life. We are what they see when they see life in progress. You see, there's a catch. There's a catch to Jesus' promise. You can't sign up for everlasting life and go on and proceed to waste the one that you're living right now. It doesn't work that way. Anyone who wants to trust that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life has to prove it by living their faith now. This whole all about me life is not acceptable to God. It takes a sincere faith to know Jesus. What do we have? We have an offer from God. We have an offer from God, which is a gift beyond all measure. How ungrateful would it be for us to ask God to hold on to it for us for a while, so that we can live our own lives with our own selfish ends in mind. God, I appreciate that you gave me an offer of eternal life. Why don't you wait until I'm old, and then maybe I'll think about it. I'd rather live my life and have some fun now. Or why don't you just let me live my whole life, and then after I die, ask me again. I'll be willing to accept that. The truth of the matter is that God hasn't promised you a chance to accept it tomorrow. In fact, he hasn't promised you that you're going to see tomorrow. You, me, or anyone. But what God has promised you is this. If you accept that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, you can begin to live that life even now. Because Jesus is the life. There's one more phrase in the end of this verse that not everyone remembers to think about. Jesus says, no one comes to the Father except through me. Now they do a lot of fancy math these days that some of us older people, when we go and try to help a middle schooler, you're like, I don't even know how to do this math anymore. I thought it was just adding and subtracting. What are you doing? Well, sometimes 2 plus 2 actually does equal 4. Sometimes it's as easy as that. Some conclusions may be difficult in life. Maybe when you did geometry, it never made any sense. Or maybe it was algebra. It just didn't make sense, you couldn't get it. For some people, it's spelling. You just can't figure it out. This is not a question like that. This is an easy thing to answer. This is the only conclusion that is possible in light of Jesus' bold claim. It will never be what the world wants to hear. The world wants to hear that you can get to heaven any way you want. That is not what Jesus is offering. That doesn't make it any less true just because the world doesn't want to hear it. Instead of all of the chaos, instead of all of the competing claims from this religion or that religion or this philosophy or that philosophy, instead of all of that, the thousands of claims from places and things and ideas that offer people hope but can't deliver. Instead of that, we have something very different. We have people who, in spite of all of the noise, in spite of all the confusion, find their way to the cross, find their way to the truth of Jesus. You see, our text this morning offers us a reminder of how simple and how clear the truth really is. Truth is always like that. People love wild, crazy explanations, conspiracies, and all these complicated explanations. In the end, the truth is always simple. And this is no exception. So whenever you are confronted or challenged by anyone or anything's claim to know the way to heaven, your reply is simple. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. What do I have for an application for this text? It's about as simple as ever coming up with my application. Because I just want to repeat what Jesus said. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. Nobody is going to heaven except through him.